This is Art 490, Baroque art history, and we're still in the Dutch Golden Age. The artists in this video are going to be the ones that are not are not the big three, Hals, Rembrandt, and Vermeer, and they're the ones that you wouldn't have seen in the general survey of art history. This first one is his name is Gerard ter Borch, and if you look at it, he looks similar to Vermeer. He differs from Vermeer in that it's there's much darker. If we look real quick at three different ones, this is ter Borch. There's another one. They're darker. They all, at least two of them, have an emphasis kind of on the brightest, most contrasting part is the skirt here, and in this case, this dress. The way light plays over a particular kind of fabric is apparently one of his specialties. This sort of satiny, silky fabric that I guess is going to have a special effect to be able to render that texture believably. Just every little bit of crinkles. The way light plays over it is different. The way it would play over, say, cotton or wool or something, something that was matte. It shines. So that's one difference. Just as Vermeer's would have an interior space with people and a bunch of props, and it has that. But he's used this darkness, this extreme light and dark contrast, to de-emphasize the stuff in the room and to emphasize the people and their actions and the kind of implied story that's going on between them. When you think back to Vermeer, his renderings were more of the interiors of rooms with the stuff and the people, but he was using the compositions of those things as a kind of a stepping off point to something at a higher level, something that's beyond just the stuff in the room and the people and whatever they happen to be doing, to something a much higher level of art. Here, ter Borch is it's a much more modest goal here. It's really to tell stories. He's using the extreme darkness to show off the things that are light, to pick out little bits of things similar to what Caravaggio was doing and other Baroque artists in other areas, but the kind of drama that you could generate with the extreme dark and light and picking out forms with a spotlight is to serve usually religious pictures, stories where there's drama occurring, where there's a martyr facing death, or a conversion, or any of those things you think of as the typical Baroque weighty extravagant sort of pictures. Think of the Spanish artist in the Baroque, or Rubens. I mean, those sorts of things, have this ingredient. But here, this is, Holland is a Protestant country, and in part of the Protestant Reformation was a dislike of images, like especially church images and the interiors of churches. They took all the Catholic churches and took all the stuff out of them, all the art and decoration, and whitewashed the walls. And people didn't have religious paintings in their houses hardly, and they were. It became popular to have things that weren't, art objects that weren't religious, like genre scenes like this, or still lives, or landscapes. Things were neutral, secular sort of things. But they would also, because they're Protestant, and they still wanted some sort of meaning in these things. They would often have little stories going on, or illustrate a proverb or a Dutch saying, something that has a moral lesson, for example, that that would give the picture a little more interest, and also a more justified as something other than a material object that's there for um, just to be a decoration. So what we're looking at is an image. It's called the suitor. What you see is a man coming into the door of a room with a family in it. There's a father here in the background, sort of looking over from, he's standing in front of the fireplace, warming himself. He's sort of looking over at the man coming in, and there's this marriageable age daughter, and he's come to be a suitor for it. And I guess this is a younger sister playing the lute, practicing for the event when a suitor comes to see her. There's a dog in it. You can tell by the body language of this man coming in. He's being gentlemanly. He's bowing. He's taking off his hat. He's doing a graceful sort of step here with his feet positioned in such a way so as to humbly present himself, and being as unostentatious as possible. And she's looking charming with her brightly shining skirt, probably her nicest thing, and hands clasped. She's looking as radiant as she can, I suppose. But this is a story being told, and it looks as though that's the main reason to have the picture, because of this story as the lesson. This is the way you behave. This is the way you come in if you're going to address a lady and you want to look humble. I mean, that sort of thing is being communicated in the gestures, the relationship between things. And notice that, he has a few elements that Vermeer would have, like a table with a Persian carpet on it, and this thing is the same sort of looking chair that you would see in a Vermeer. There's even I think that's a violin or a cello or something on the table, and the lute. I mean, it has stuff, but they're downplayed. When you look at the amount of contrast, this is all of lesser contrast over here, and the brightness, the bright color here, and the bright shininess over here are a way to focus your eyes on this, and also the relationship between these two things. This bright white against black makes a pair of the two, and they, he's emphasizing that and de-emphasizing the stuff. Okay, so just to show you another example of the same artist, this is 10Baroque. This is a picture of his sister, and she this is like a portrait of a girl in his or a portrait of a young woman, and the fact that it's his sister was one who posed for him, because she was a painter in her own right. But what we see is a woman sitting there, but she has expression. She looks like she's tired, she's worn out, and she's just sitting down to rest. The way she's holding this paper in his hand, there's probably some sort of story going on here as well. And that's the purpose of it, is to communicate some sort of story, or the character of the people involved. And when you think back to, say, the Vermeers, they did have people, and they were engaged in a kind of a story, but it really wasn't about that, and you didn't think of that aspect of the picture as the main part of the picture. Here's this third one. I don't even know what the story. This might also be a suitor. If it is, it's not as obvious as the one in the one you have on your list. This one. And this seems to be all about this relationship, and all this area here is just to sort of push them together. All right, the next artist is named Steen, and he's his specialty, and I use the word specialty because all these artists that we're looking at, and most of all of them that occurred in the Dutch Golden Age, were specialists. They were people who, whatever it is they did the one thing, and they did it over and over and over, and became experts at the one thing that they did. Um, this is a specialist. He painted interiors with people, but they're often boisterous, cluttered, noisy, and there's some sort of lesson being taught here, a moral lesson of some kind. This one's called "Beware of Luxury," and this is not the one on your list. I just want to show you just a sample of this artist's work, other than the one that's on your list. But uh, in a world where there's the people buy artwork to put in their houses, and they're modest, you know, they don't want to be ostentatious, and buying stuff and putting it in your house to decorate your house is kind of a upper class immodest thing to do. So they would diminish that aspect of it by picking works that are deliberately um, um, filled with things that are what not to do, lessons on so that you don't get too uppity or too sinful in one way or another. Um, so what's going on here is it says beware of luxury. So all these things in the picture apparently are the mishaps or whatever that occur when you overindulge. So one little bit, there's a monkey up there with pulling the strings uh, on the clock. All sorts of stuff going on. I don't even know what all is going on. But this little thing here, this glass and this lemon, I want to remember that for later because we're going to see a still life with that in it. Anyway, the work that we have on your list for Jan Steen is this one. It's called The Feast of St. Nicholas, which is Christmas. So we get to see what is Christmas like in Holland. And this also has its own moral lessons to it. It does have a kind of a tenebrism, dark, with things picked out with a spotlight that you expect from a Baroque picture. But it's noisy and cluttered, which is apparently Jan Steen's thing, his specialty. Filling it with lots of people doing all sorts of stuff, and there's stories being told among them. The focus here is on this little girl. This is Christmas morning, and she's holding her present, which was a little doll of John the Baptist. So has a cross there and this outfit and halo, whatever, and she's just clutching it like it's a precious object to her, and she also has a bucket, and in the bucket are several little doodads that apparently are things she got for Christmas. Her mom's there, sort of asking her to come to her, and she's leaning away as though she's clutching with avarice all of her goodies. Apparently, instead of in Holland, instead of getting your toys out of a stocking, they get them out of a shoe. So that's the shoe that is empty now because she put all the stuff in her bucket. There's also this kid over here who's a boy who apparently he was naughty, so he didn't get anything. And this is the shoe. It's kind of hard to see. It's dark, but his sister is smiling and holding the shoe, and it doesn't have presents in it apparently. And this other younger brother is pointing and laughing at him for having been naughty, and he's crying. I think there's stuff in the shoe. It looks like it might be switches. I know that there's tradition if you've been naughty, your stocking is filled with ashes and soot and switches. That might be what that is. Switches. They're sort of like the things that are growing out the window outside like this. Something to beat him with. What else is going on in the back of there's his grandfather back there who's amused by it, and there's a grandmother over here who's sort of I guess signaling to him and smiling as though she may have a secret present back there for him, and so that he's not so sad. But just the notion of displaying or rendering an image of a crying boy and with his not getting a present is a kind of a moral lesson. If you're naughty, you don't get stuff. And that's part of the thing. But you're also celebrating Christmas and seeing what happens in the real world. When we think of these interior images with people from Vermeer, they're not really about the reality of the real world. at all. They're not about what people actually do, though. And if you look at some of his pictures, I mean, there are things that people are actually doing, but it's not about what they're doing. Here, it's about what they're doing and about the stories and about the culture that is being expressed. Little boy singing over here. There's a man here, and I know from Wikipedia that what's going on in this little vignette is that uh, one of the members of the family is holding a child and is pointing at the chimney. Apparently, he's pointing out where Father Christmas came from, down the chimney. We look back on this first picture. This is what a chimney looks like. It's kind of hard to see in that picture, but apparently he's standing there pointing up in the chimney where Santa Claus came. There's also still lifes with uh, the kind of things that would be also in a Dutch family on Christmas morning. This special sort of bread that is baked probably once a year for the occasion. And there's a bunch of there's an apple and some candy and other stuff that's I think that might be a candle. Other stuff that's around. There's a coin in the apple. All these things apparently are traditional. There's the shoe. There's a toy on the floor. Another toy apparently. There's like cat toys actually. A walnut that's been broken, adding more clutter and mess. There's bread, special kind of breads and waffles. That are all apparently part of the traditional Christmas. So he's put everything in there. It's almost like a Norman Rockwell scene. I imagine that Norman Rockwell owed a lot to this sort of picture, and also other illustrators of like Hogarth, for example, later English painter. This sort of thing of images that of an interior space with lots of people doing stuff, and there's stories going on, and often moral stories. All right, so the next one is landscape. Jacob van Ruisdael is this artist. He specialized in landscape, and we have this one and this one. Let me back up. One thing you notice about Dutch landscapes often is that the horizon is low. This one is like 1/3 the height. Some of them are even lower. Some are way down here. It's because Holland is flat and the sky dominates. And since the sky is filled with all sorts of weather conditions changing all the time, it's interesting stuff going on in the sky. So when they paint landscapes, the sky is a big part of it. And because it's Baroque, the sky is where the interesting stuff is going on. The drama is going on because of the sky. If you're painting a picture of a religious scene where there's actual drama in the story, then you don't need this sort of thing. But if you're doing a landscape, how do you get drama? I mean, there's nothing going on. This is just a scene of everyday life. Some people over here. There's a windmill. There's a house, and there's a boat, the mast of a boat, and there's a boat on the water, and there's water with non-turbulent water going on. So what the drama comes from the lighting. Light pours in through gaps in the clouds. I mean, this. If you've ever seen this effect where you have partly cloudy skies, and you have you see some blue, and you also see some clouds, and some of the clouds are dark, and some of them are light, and you have sun peeking through, and you have pools of light on the ground where the sun is coming through. All these things, are what are creating the drama. So as to have a more interesting picture than just something where nothing is going on. And the windmill looks like a heroic windmill, and the light here looks like special provenance from God, kind of light shining down. So you can imagine more to it than just simply the landscape, and they're eye candy. The one that you have on your list is called the View of Haarlem. This is a painting, also a Dutch landscape with a low horizon. If you look this up on Wikipedia, you'll see that there's I don't know 7 or 8 pictures of the same scene by the same artist. Seen from slightly different angles and some of different proportions. So he made his whole career was these sorts of pictures, and this particular one is one that he made many different versions of. What's going on in the picture is, if you look closely over here, they're bleaching linen. They would make linen in a loom, I guess, and they would make long strips, and they would lay them out on the ground, and they would be bleached that way as part of the process, apparently, of making linen. And that was something that Haarlem, where this is set, it's a view of Haarlem, is something that they're famous for. So something that, Dutch landscapes are famous for being flat and having windmills and having a great big sky with lots of interesting clouds, a few birds in there. And because this particular place is famous for linen, this is another thing. So he's putting the sort of thing that the market for art, which is mostly middle and upper middle class merchants, say lawyers, doctors, the professionals, would buy pictures to put in their house to decorate them. And since they couldn't put, religious pictures, they needed to be secular pictures. So among the secular pictures that were acceptable would be landscapes. And Ruisdael, among the, perhaps dozens or scores of painters who were the landscape specialist, was especially good at it, especially because he was able to create drama using these pools of light that come when the sun pokes through the clouds and puts light on something. And here it happens to put light on this space where they're bleaching the linens. So there's some drama going on with that. They're also really gorgeous to look at. You just look at them, the original ones up close. They're just the texture of the paint, the color. There's just very pretty things. And that's why we're looking at. I have two different versions. There's this one is the higher res, but it's not particularly sharp, and it's also warmer. So I don't know which one is truer to the original or not. Interesting. A lot of them have this there's essentially two rectangles. There's the sky rectangle and the ground rectangle, and it's often interrupted at some point with some building. Here's just a couple little points that stick up, something that adds some extra interest, and often this is minimized just to just a tiny little things, unlike this other example where you have a great big heroic windmill in the picture. Okay, the next landscape artist, his name Albert Cuyp, C-U-Y-P. He specialized in a certain kind of lighting condition, but in addition to specializing in landscapes, his are often images of sunsets and sunrises, where you have this low angle light and creating shadows and illuminating the world. Usually a rural landscape. People who live in cities, like to have pictures of rural stuff to sort of remind them in a sort of nostalgic way of perhaps they grew up on the farm and then moved to the city, and they would want to look back at that sort of the nature and things, because when you're a city you don't see as much nature. So this artist, since there was a lot of competition among landscape painters, since there are so many of them, and landscapes were particularly sought after. His specialty was this kind of sky, this kind of lighting condition, and specializing in lighting conditions means that you study light and how light falls over things, and the different kind of moods that you get with light. In this case, the light is way over here on the left, just outside the picture, the light source, and it's shining light on these cows, and they look much more heroic in this lighting than they would if you were actually there looking at them. So he's not trying to record like a journalist, say, oh, this is a place where I saw some cows. This is like raising the idea of cows and the whole rural world to a much higher level. Let's look at that sky. Lots of neat stuff going on in it. Lots of drama and action and stuff. You know, if you can't have real drama. You have, sort of imaginary drama. Another painting by the same artist, Cuyp, is he also did seascapes. This is the mouth of a river where all sorts of ships are in the harbor, and but it feels as though there's stuff going on, stuff of import. There's urgency in people rowing boats and doing things so as to create more drama. And look at this guy. Look at the way the light is playing over all these clouds. That's pretty neat. Kind of like a Maxfield Parrish illustration. Flag waving, birds in the air. All these things were particularly sought after by artists, by the public who are buying. Let's call them the painting buying public. There's one other by this. This is a little more like what you think of Baroque in terms of tenebrism and light picking out stuff. But again, there's nothing happening. It's just there's a cow sitting on the ground, resting, probably at the end of the day, at the sunset, and another cow here. We're seeing front on foreshortened, and you see a shepherd or a cowherd. And that's all. It's just about that. It's just about the quiet solitude, lighting, just the feeling, the mood you get from that place. Okay, the next artist. I'm going through these rather quick, since I don't have that many worked by the same artist. This one is by Hobima. He's an artist who was a student of Ruisdael, and he painted, a whole career of just woodland scenes and in roads, all, and most of them are kind of, I don't know. You've seen one, you've seen them all. It's kind of boring. After a while, you see the same thing over and over and over. But right at the end of his career, and as it turned out, right at the end of the Dutch golden age of painting, he produced this, and it was different from all his other pictures. And instead of being sort of an idealized landscape, or a landscape that's sort of engineered to look dramatic, let's look back real quick. This kind of engineer, that is, he probably didn't stand there in the landscape painting this, and he wasn't, he didn't have to wait for the light to hit it right where he wanted. He could do this in the studio. But this looks like a recording of an actual place for some reason, and it is an actual place. They know the road, they know the buildings, they know all these landmarks, and they know when that orchard was planted, and they know the things that are recognizable, when those things were built and how long they were there. So this is a well-researched sort of picture. They know exactly where this is, and it's recorded exactly as it was, or at least largely as it was. This is a road. We're looking straight down a road with the perspective of a bunch of really skinny trees that apparently have their branches cut off, up except for the very tippy tops. And so that you get the little bundle of leaves at the top going back into perspective here and here. And they create a kind of little box right here, within the rectangle. And that's just, with a diagonal here and a diagonal here. It's a nice little compositional thing. And just that sort of weak, they're so skinny, wobbly little trees. It doesn't seem like, how are they standing up? They're so weak looking, but they create this shape in the middle that is the foundation of the picture. This rectangle, this vertical rectangle within the horizontal rectangle. And you have the repeating lines going back. But he's not really emphasizing so much the space. That is, you can see that there's space going back there, and this perspective does that. But he's diminished it a lot. Like this this bit stopping right there and this bit stopping right there, repeating the horizontals like this. I'll keep it from being too spacious. This looks like a surface design thing, and it's just, yeah, let's look at it closely. We have some resolution here. There's a man with a gun and a dog out hunting. Other miscellaneous people on the road. People talking to others. There's sort of barn. I think this is the massive ships that are in the. This is an island in the delta of a river. Apparently, this is where they raise these trees. Look at the other side. There's a man tending the trees here. It's actually unusual for a Dutch landscape to actually have people working the land and farmers doing stuff. Apparently, this is where those trees come from. They cut off all the limbs except for the very top. His name, Hobema, right there. The realism of everything is very nice. You look at that reflection and the painterliness of it. Gives it a life to it. Feathery brush strokes, nice little details, and it just was kind of luscious. But that particular compositional element of these trees making a rectangle. I was reading about this, and they said that originally they did a X-ray of the picture, and they found that he originally had another pair of trees right here in this space, and he decided against it and painted them out. And I could see why. It's like this works so well, and that having more trees here would seem like that would create a different painting inside the painting. So anyway, that's Dutch landscape pictures. Now, another genre, or specialized genre of interiors with people in them, is church interiors. And this is an example of the kind of churches that they would have, the Gothic churches, sometimes Romanesque churches, that are painted white on the inside and without any decoration, or minimize the decoration. The artist's name is Peter Saenredam, and he was just a kind of obsessed with the detail and the perfect perspectival rendering of the interiors of churches. Here's one. I think that this is the one on your list, but I also have one like this, grand looking pictures and complex, enormously complex things to draw. All of these complex vaultings, for example, in perspective. Here's another one showing the nave pillars on either side of the nave back over here. But it's kind of an interesting way to look at it. It's like when I look at this actually looks similar to the way, if you wanted to illustrate the building, if you were to go into this church and take a picture so as to see as much of it, this looks kind of like that. But this one, and also this one, the one we're looking at, it seemed like an odd place to put the camera, or to make the drawing. He would go into these churches and make really fine, detailed measurements and pencil and ink drawings of all the details. I mean, look at the. Let's see how close I can get. Yeah, about that close. Okay, look at the floor. Interesting, decoration of the floor of just different kinds of colors of tiles. But just this perspective is. It's just so intricate that it is able to get such what appears to be an accurate foreshortening of the floor and all the complexities of different patterns on the tiles. Apparently, he's like someone who is obsessed with the thing. There's his name, Saenredam, 1645. Just 3 years after the Night Watch was painted. It's in Utrecht. and some people milling around, just I guess to give you the scale of it, to show you how gigantic these churches are inside. The original churches would have had stained glass with lots of art and splendor from precious metals and carving of stuff all everywhere. But they've taken all that out and made it as plain as possible. In fact, I believe Saenredam has cleaned it up even more. He's taken away as much of the clutter as possible, just to see the forms of the insides of the church. Rather, I think he may have been not the only one, but there's very few of these kinds of pictures. These are just really studious, intricate kind of pictures. Okay, Saenredam. Take a quick look at this other one by him. Interesting compositions and the people. Yep. And here's one exterior picture, just to show you that he also did this. He has the same degree of fidelity to all of the intricacies of rendering forms with perspective. And here's another genre that I didn't put on your list as a thing to remember a particular artist's name, but just to show you that there existed another genre, which was flower pictures, just a vase of flowers, and that's the whole subject, and is rendered, in this case, as dramatically as one could possibly do that. And the people who specialized in these sorts of things, you know, understood and knew exactly, how to render every flower, and they're all presumably botanically accurate. And there's a little spider or something. Um, they're all just gorgeous little things filled with as much detail as a person could cram into the space. Imagine that there were lots of people who painted still lifes with flowers, and so it was a huge competition among them, and those who were the ones who did it better were the ones who sold. Um, this artist is named Ruisdael, Ruysh, and I have other. I mean, it goes on and on. I mean, here's another one by the same artist, and here's another one. They're just very pretty decorative images, uh, filled with interesting things to look at. There's a bird's nest. There's a moth, and enormous variety of flowers. There's a damselfly. So just so you know, if you go to uh, art museums that have a section of Dutch Golden Age, you'll probably see these sorts of things as well. All right, the last artist on your list that I have is named Peter Claesz, Claesz, and he did his specialty was still lifes, and the still lifes were they within the still life genre, there were subgenres, and some of them were some artists specialized in just late breakfasts or some other meal, or they would have a group of objects on a table that had some sort of special morality message, usually the vanitas theme, so as that you not get so vain, or the theme of reminding you of your death, like having a skull in the picture or something like that. Those things would be popular so as to not just be a picture of the luxury of a bunch of food. But even if you did just have the luxury of a bunch of food, there is this message in that, like say this lemon, is something that only is fresh just a very short time. It's something to remind you of, that time is fleeting, and here is something that it's only going to be like this, is appealing for just a moment. So there's that sort of message behind these. But the main message is just the eye candy of looking at a bunch of textures and colors that are just beautiful to look at, and arranged in some sort of interesting composition. There's lots of them, and as it happens, many of them have these same elements. This particular kind of glass um, is called a Beamer, Bomer, I believe is what it's called, with an umlaut over the O. And this is called a taza. It's a kind of a metal cup. And having a lemon here, as I pointed out earlier. Let's see, this picture. This has those same two elements. Well, lots of different artists, not just the one we're looking at, did these same two objects. Apparently, they were just a very popular thing to do, to have a picture of these things. And I think in this painting, which is having the moral lesson about luxuries, is putting them in there as a reference to the fact that lots and lots of still lives have those elements in them. We look back at the artist we're looking at is Claesz. He has a here's another one with other stuff, but here's a competitor, someone named Heda, Heda, who did the same sort of thing, just another still life painter, and someone who specialized in this particular sort of meal. Also has a lemon curled with the peel coming off the table with a slice here, and another one of these glasses. It's the little bumps on the glasses to help you hold it so it doesn't slip out of your hand. Different kinds of metals, different kind of surfaces, and the way light plays over everything. This is just an extravaganza of things to look at. But the one we're looking at is a little plainer. They come in different degrees. Some of them are more sumptuous. Some have just an overwhelming variety of different kinds of foods and objects that would be on the table. This one, he still also has, in addition to the taza, a watch. There's a watch, and it's been opened up so that you can see the works inside, giving the artist an opportunity to show off more. And there's a key on a string, and a book. Why is the taza on its side like this? Is so you can see the underside. You can see the artist has a chance to show you more textures and more opportunities for light to glint off of all the different textured surfaces of the thing, and to show off that you can do glass, especially the sort of tinted glass, and the way light refracts and reflects off of it. There's a window always reflected in it. The little bumps in this glass is different from the other one. I don't seem like this would be uncomfortable to hold. Bread, silver or pewter, a knife. I think this is the hallmark for the artist's name is CP or PC for Peter Claesz, and the date. Bread, olives, walnuts, lots of stuff, but just the texture, the way light glints off of textures. When the cloth was folded and unfolded, it left little creases. The citrus rind. All the things are observed, and the artist is showing off his ability and competing with the other artists who are using the same objects and practically the same thing. I think there's if you were to look at all of the Dutch still life paintings from the period, you'd find the same sorts of things done over and over and over, because they were just, the public just ate them up. So that finishes, I believe, the Dutch Golden Age.